It is almost a big game weekend. That is correct. And it is almost time for Super Bowl 56. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Very Cold Lasagna, the podcast that houses a safe and open listening platform for casual, cold, and all the dumb takes on the world of pro wrestling and sports. I'm your host, DylanLasagna. Welcome to today's episode 91 of this freezing cold podcast that houses the icy and spicy lasagna in that very cold fridge. Today, we got one thing on our mind, and that is Super Bowl. That is right, Super Bowl 56 in Los Angeles in, sadly, Rams house. Yes, I say sadly because as a 49ers fan, well, we have to sit and watch the LA Rams take on the Cincinnati Bengals. And, down deep in my heart, I'm pulling for the Bengals, but anything can happen, but we'll see as we chug along through this episode. But, here we are. It's been, 4, 5 months, 6 months, however many months it's been since the regular season started. Like, holy heck. I feel like it's been very fast. It's been just yesterday. It's just been yesterday since the NFL season started back in September when I started talking about week 1 of the NFL season. And here we are just, 8 months ago. And we're talking about the very last game of the 2021 season, and that is the Super Bowl. And who knew that it'd be between these two teams? Like, nobody expected this. Like, for all the preseason hype, like, everyone was predicting Tampa Bay and Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, or whichever team that the media was, all in the shits and glamours for. Instead, it's these two teams, the LA Rams and the big underdog, the Cincinnati Bengals. Like, holy hell, who expected this one just about 8 months ago? I mean, surely maybe the LA Rams, who made the big trade for Matthew Stafford just a year ago, but nobody expected the Cincinnati Bengals to make it this far, this deep into the postseason, into the Super Bowl. And, it's an interesting one. It's going to be Cincinnati's third Super Bowl trip since losing Super Bowl 23. Their first one since losing Super Bowl 23 to Joe Montana and the 49ers back in 1989. So literally 31 years ago. Literally 31 long years. I guess you could count 32, 33. I can't do math. But anyway, either way, over 30 long years for Cincinnati to have a return trip to the Super Bowl. Meanwhile, you look at the LA Rams, it's going to be their 5th appearance overall in the Super Bowl, in the 3rd one as the LA Rams. And, they're going to be seeking their 2nd title since 1999, where they won their first and currently only one. When you had Kurt Warner and Isaac Bruce go toe-to-toe with the Tennessee Titans, and the Titans were literally just 1 yard short of winning their very own first Super Bowl title in Super Bowl 34. And this was when the Rams were still in St. Louis. They were little teeny babies down in St. Louis, Missouri. So for the Rams, they were looking for that 2nd title and that first one down in LA. And for the Rams, they're kind of making some history here. The 2nd straight team to play the Super Bowl in its home stadium. Obviously, we know last year, Tom Brady and the Bucs were the very first ones to do it. For the Rams, they're the first ones to host not just the Super Bowl in its home stadium, but also to do a kind of like a back-to-back. The first one to host the conference championship game and the Super Bowl in its home stadium in consecutive weeks, I guess. So for the Rams, I mean, sorry, you get a big host of games. But for the Rams, I guess you're not really the home team this time around because this annual rotation that the NFL does each year, because in even years, the AFC is the home team. And this year, the NFC is the visiting team. So for the Rams this year, they are the designated visiting team, even though they're technically at home this year. But nonetheless, I don't think it really matters for LA. It doesn't matter for Cincinnati. It honestly does not matter for either team. So going into this game, this is also the first Super Bowl that's going to feature two former first overall picks in Matthew Stafford and Joe Burrow. Matthew Stafford being drafted in 2009 by the Detroit Lions, and Joe Burrow being drafted by, well, the Cincinnati Bengals just 2 years ago in the 2020 draft. And this is also going to be a Super Bowl that doesn't feature a top 3 seeded team, and also a team that didn't have a first round bye. So neither of these teams are a top seeded team. Neither of these teams were in like the top 3 when it came to playoff seeding. So very interesting stuff when you look at it on paper. And two of the head coaches in this game, the 2 head coaches in this game are relatively young. I think Sean McVay is 36. Zach Taylor, I'm not sure how old he is, but somewhere around his 30s, I believe. But Sean McVay and Zach Taylor, 2 of the youngest head coaches in the NFL, going at it in the Super Bowl. So for everyone watching around the world, it's going to be an interesting one. But, I mean, it could go either way. It could be an interesting game. It could be a close game. Or it could be pretty much what 2 of the last couple of Super Bowls have been. It could be either a boring one, like Super Bowl 53 was, or it could be a total blowout like last year's Super Bowl ended up being. So when we look at both of these teams, let's start with the LA Rams. They had an interesting season all around. Like I said, they make the big trade for Matthew Stafford last year to upgrade at quarterback from Jared Goff, their old quarterback, their old first overall pick. I mean, for the Rams, they went to the Super Bowl with Jared Goff in 2018 to Super Bowl 53. But when it came to nut busting time, Jared Goff couldn't get the job done against Tom Brady and the Patriots in that very low scoring Super Bowl game, 13-3 in Super Bowl 53. And Jared Goff significantly regressed since then, and Sean McVay finally realized it was time that he needed an upgrade. So last year, he made the nut-busting move to go get Matthew Stafford in Detroit. He traded a king's ransom to the Lions, while also giving them Jared Goff in that trade. So last year, they go all in. They put all their chips onto the casino table, and they're making that run towards the Super Bowl. And, halfway through the season, it really paid off. They're 7-1. They seemed like the favorites to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl, and most of it was because of Matthew Stafford and his connection, his chemistry with Cooper Kupp, the NFL's, like, one of the NFL's top receivers, if not the top receiver in the league this year. So Cooper Kupp was a very electric receiver this year because Matthew Stafford made him one. But then you get to the middle of this portion of the season where the Rams had a 3-game skid. Matthew Stafford went back to his old habits of Detroiting. In other words, Pat Stafford. He tried to do a lot of things that would hurt the Rams, like he did in Detroit, committing self-inflicted turnovers or let the pass rush get to him. And he put the Rams in big holes against the Tennessee Titans, the San Francisco 49ers, and the Green Bay Packers. They were on a 3-game losing streak. And while that eventually put them out of the running for the top seed in the NFC, it didn't derail their hopes for a Super Bowl. And, this stretch, during that stretch, that 3-game losing stretch, they would also continue to push their tables onto the chips. See what I did there? By trading for Von Miller, a former Super Bowl MVP, and they also went out and got the then recently released Odell Beckham Jr. to fill in for the then injured Robert Woods. Well, he still is lost because he tore his ACL before Week 10. As for Von Miller, he was a good complement to help out the defensive stud Aaron Donald with a pass rush. So clearly the chips were all laid out, all pushed in for this fortune gambling, mortgage gambling bid to go out and win the Super Bowl this year. So to end the season, the Rams would win their next 5 games. They won a critical game in Arizona. They got their revenge from Week 4. And while the Rams were reeling and dealing, they also saw Arizona and Kyler Murray, going on a massive cold streak and a late season collapse. Unfortunately for Los Angeles, that 5-game winning streak came to a halt when they choked against the San Francisco 49ers at home in Week 18. That while they did get the NFC West, thanks to Arizona losing to Seattle at home, that was during the time where the Rams were choking it and eventually losing to the 49ers in overtime and letting them get into the playoffs. So, while at the time that loss seemed like it would make the Rams look like second round fodlers to whoever they were going to play, it became soon apparent that this loss would actually serve as motivation for this deeper run that LA was eventually going to have, because in the playoffs, the Rams bounced back in the wild card against Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals in a very dominant display on Monday night. Then you go to the divisional playoffs where they jump out to this big 27-3 lead against Tom Brady and the Bucs, but then they squandered that away thanks to some bad turnovers, and that allowed Tom Brady and the offense to come back in the game, tie things up. But then Matthew Stafford took advantage of a big secondary collapse in coverage and connected with Cooper Kupp in perhaps the biggest career moment that he's had, and set up Matt Gay, their kicker, for a game-winning field goal to get them to the NFC Championship and upset the defending Super Bowl champions. But it wasn't all easy swinging for the Rams, because they had to face a team that they couldn't beat 6 straight times in the last 2 years in the underdog San Francisco 49ers and Jimmy Garbage fail. So to secure their Super Bowl berth, they barely had to overcome their own offensive rut. Matthew Stafford was kind of Detroiting. He was kind of getting rattled by the pass rush of the 49ers. He's getting choked up by the bright lights of being 1 game away from the Super Bowl. But then they rallied together in the fourth quarter and got some help from the 49ers' own choking and limitations to win the NFC Championship game, go on to the Super Bowl, and have it at home. So for the Rams, they finally got what they needed. They're in the Super Bowl, they're at home, and they're 4 quarters away from getting their second Super Bowl title in the first one in LA. For the Rams this season, a lot of things came to their success. First of all, Matthew Stafford. When he's not turning the ball over, he's clearly thrived in this offense. He throws a good deep ball. He knows where to find Cooper Kupp or Odell Beckham or guys like Van Jefferson or Tyler Higbee. But, he knows how to throw the strike to either one of those guys when they're open. Speaking of Cooper Kupp, he's been the best explosive receiver in the NFL this season. And once Odell Beckham eventually settled into the role of receiver 2 behind Kupp, he was a playmaker. He became a key component of the offense. And then not only that, you have a strong offensive line that's led by a longtime veteran and former Cincinnati Bengal, Andrew Whitworth. And you also got a strong supporting cast of Tyler Higbee and Van Jefferson. And you also got a decent running game in Cam Akers and Sony Michel. And who knows if Darrell Henderson is going to come back for the game to make a 3-headed running attack, but who knows? On the defensive side, Aaron Donald and Von Miller remain a strong unit. They have actually go head to hand with as a 1-2 punch that can get to the quarterback, get some sacks, create some pressure to force opposing quarterbacks into mistakes, like as they did in the NFC Championship game against Jimmy Garoppolo. And also in that game, they managed to sell out and shut down the run. And they can certainly do that if their hearts and minds are into it. In the secondary, Jalen Ramsey, their corner, has done a good job as a shutdown corner against other top receivers. So for the Rams, a lot of keys to success. However, that doesn't mean they're like super invincible. They're not Thanos of the NFL, because for the Rams, they can get in their own way sometimes. Matthew Stafford If he welts under incoming pressure or he doesn't see the pass rush coming to him, he can either get zacked or he can create some wacky ass turnover. When it comes to his deep balls too, sometimes he underestimates the throw, or he throws it, overthrows it too much, that it creates some missed opportunities for points, or it gets intercepted by the defense. And the running game so far, like with Cam Akers coming back, it leaves a little bit to be desired. For looking at this game, looking at the Rams running game, if you're a Rams fan, you wish there was a little bit more when it came to Sony Michel and Cam Akers. Sure, they face teams with really good run defenses, but it's on them to find an open space to run the ball and space the field. And then when it comes to the secondary, outside of Jalen Ramsey, they can be an easy target for opposing offenses, because whether it's attack in the middle with linebacker Leonard Floyd or any corner that's not Jalen Ramsey, this secondary actually gives up sizable plays. Whether it's like those chunk plays that turn into big plays, or like the deep ball that's away from Jalen Ramsey, this secondary actually gives up some chunkable plays. So for the Rams, like they have a talented core. They have some big strengths on both sides of the ball. But if they get in their own way, those weaknesses that I mentioned, they can actually cause their downfall in a game, and they can't afford it in a game like the Super Bowl. Meanwhile, you look at the Cincinnati Bengals. They were initially predicted by the mainstream media to end the season near, like, in third place or at the bottom of the AFC North. And I'm not sure if they predicted like the Ravens or the Browns or even the Steelers to win the division. But here we are 8 months later. They well exceeded expectations, not just going 10-7, but they've actually won the division for the first time since 2015. And it wasn't easy for Cincinnati. They had some struggles with consistency, especially in the middle portion of the season. But they had a late season surge from the offense, and that was the key to putting key performances together, especially better performances from Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. Pretty much the entire offense needed to have better performances and very consistent ones. If against the likes of the Baltimore Ravens, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Pittsburgh Steelers, late down the season, they needed those key wins, and we certainly got it. And they also got some help because the rest of the AFC North was pretty much imploding within itself. The Baltimore Ravens were having an injury mania in Maryland, including to their quarterback, Lamar Jackson. Ben Roethlisberger, well, dealing with father time, washed his luck. And the Steelers' offense was pretty much held back to just Najee Harris. That's it. And then Baker Mayfield was hurt for most of the season with a shoulder injury, and he willingly played hurt. He didn't want to sit out the year with the shoulder injury till like the last game of the season when the Browns were already eliminated. So the Browns offense was clearly affected by that, and their defense was also regressing as well. So Cincinnati definitely took advantage of a imploding division within and went on to make some magic happen and won the division. But when they got to the playoffs, questions came about, and it was like, can they make some noise? Can they make an impact? How much of a run can they make towards, like, not just like a one game win, because, well, we want to defy all Marvin Lewis gods. How much of a run can they actually make to, let's say, the AFC Championship game or past the wild card? Well, we found out that answer. They go on to hold off the Las Vegas Raiders after they had their own after Cincinnati had its own hot start. They beat the Raiders in the first round. And then, in the divisional playoffs against the Tennessee Titans, they allowed 9 sacks on Joe Burrow from the Tennessee Titans pass rush. But they didn't seem to mind. The offensive line didn't seem to mind the 9 sacks on Joe Burrow because Ryan Tannehill of the Tennessee Titans had himself a pretty shitty day himself. Throwing 3 interceptions, 3 costly game-changing interceptions, especially the third interception being the one that set up Evan McPherson, Stone Cold McPherson, their rookie kicker, for a game-winning field goal that set them to the AFC Championship over the top seed Tennessee Titans 19-16. But like I said, how far would they go? How far would they actually manage to go? Because next came their biggest test of all in the AFC Championship game against the conference's King of Kings, the Kansas City Chiefs, and Patrick Mahomes. So a big test awaited them in Arrowhead. For Mahomes and the Chiefs, they were just coming off a big win, a big overtime win against Buffalo and Josh Allen. And even then, this is a very, very tough Kansas City team that Joe Burrow and Cincinnati was going to go up and face. And early on, it seemed like it was going to be an easy victory for Kansas City again in the AFC Championship game, because they raced out to a early 21-3 lead on their first 3 possessions, but a mistake to go for it at the goal line right before the halftime. I think that was the big turnaround that Cincinnati needed, because after halftime, once they started the second half, you notice a defensive shift and a defensive adjustment centered around containing Patrick Mahomes into the pocket, creating outside pressure to keep him in there, and the secondary did a better job covering his receivers, and Mahomes was clearly flustered, and Joe Burrow was Joe Cool in the second half, and the Bengals managed to overcome that deficit, got back in the game, eventually had the lead at one point, 24-21. The Chiefs were sent into overtime, but the Bengals defense locked down again, got to Mahomes with pressure, forced a key interception on Mahomes that would pretty much all but seal Cincinnati's 3rd Super Bowl berth. All they had to do was just milk that shit all the way down to Evan McPherson's range again. And all Shooter McPherson had to do was kick the game winner and send Cincinnati to its 3rd Super Bowl in a big-ass upset. So for Cincinnati, when it comes to their successes, a lot of it has to do to the improvement of Joe Burrow, their second-year quarterback. When you look at his rookie year, you saw some flashes, but, he got injured. He had an ACL tear in Washington midway into his rookie year. So to see Joe Burrow progress, significantly, to see him improve, it's a big step for Cincinnati. And then you go on in the draft last year to add Jamar Chase, his teammate from Louisiana State. These two clearly have a chemistry. And then you have a supporting cast that we cannot discount. Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, 2 explosive weapons, and along with CJ Uzama and the running game of Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine. Clearly, this is an explosive offense as well. Defensively, they have a good unit as well that can get to the quarterback. Some questions on the secondary though, but defensively, they're a solid unit. And most importantly, the Bengals have a very reliable kicker, and is also a very young kicker, but also very reliable in Evan McPherson, who handles pressure very well, game-winning situations very well, with a strong leg, cool demeanor. Evan McPherson is ice cold, man. But when it comes to, Cincinnati's weaknesses, perhaps our biggest one is the offensive line. Much like last year, their inability to pass block against the best of defensive lines, it can get them into trouble, and it can give them very little time for Joe Burrow to get the ball out, throw it to guys like Chase, Higgins, Boyd. If the offensive line cannot protect Joe Burrow, he's going to quickly get sacked. And Cincinnati's secondary is also somewhat questionable as well. Eli Apple has a lot of issues with coverage, especially in the first halves of games. Second half, if he can make adjustments, he can definitely be somewhat of a decent corner. And, the run defense has also had trouble with preventing chunk runs against the likes of Derrick Henry or in the duo of Jerick McKinnon and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Can they lock down against Sony Michel and Cam Akers? That remains to be seen. But since he has had some trouble with preventing and closing out the running, closing in the running lanes against other running backs. So some of the biggest storylines going into this Super Bowl is the one-on-one matchup with Jamar Chase and Jalen Ramsey. It's going to be interesting to see how Jalen Ramsey does against Jamar Chase and vice versa. The battle of the first former overall picks. Like I said, Matthew Stafford drafted first overall by the Lions in 2009, and it took him 13 years for him to reach his first Super Bowl. Joe Burrow drafted just 2 years ago, and here he is now, just 2 years later, going to his first Super Bowl ever in just 2 seasons. He's literally the fastest first overall pick to do it. History making for him. And the battle between Bengals offensive line versus the Rams defensive line. Can the Bengals offensive line outduel? Can they actually protect Joe Burrow enough to contain Donald, Miller, that entire defensive front from getting to Burrow? That remains to be seen. Now, when you look at who can win the battle, there are some keys to victory for both teams. For the Rams, you have to attack the Bengals' biggest weakness up front. That right side, which uses a rotation of the rookie Jackson Carman and second year guard Hakeem Denji. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that name. And as well as the right tackle Isaiah Prince. They haven't done well holding off top defensive linemen during the playoffs. But still, it's good that their defensive line coach is using that rotation of Carman and Adeniji. Sorry, there we go. Now I'm pronouncing it right. So, it's good that they're using that rotation, but the results have yet to be positive for Cincinnati when it comes to that right side. So for Aaron Donald and Von Miller, it's gonna be beneficiary for them, especially with those two on Cincinnati side not doing so well. So they gotta do all they can to take advantage of such weakness and create some interior pressure or edge pressure to get to Joe Burrow. And for Matthew Stafford, he's got to have a mistake-free performance, obviously, but he's also got to start the game faster. During the second half of the NFC Championship game, we saw that Stafford was getting rattled by the 49ers pass rush, and he made a very, very bad throw in double coverage that ended up being intercepted by Jimmy Ward in the end zone. So for the Rams, Matthew Stafford has to relax. Sean McVay has to ease Matthew Stafford in, get him settled in with some simple play calls, get some quick short passes in or some mid-range passes into Cooper Kupp, to get the offense settled in, get them on a faster start, and then once they settle in, get them dialed in with the big play throws. For Cincinnati, if the offensive line continues to fail, absolutely cannot contain Aaron Donald and Von Miller. Zach Taylor's got to scheme some quick throws for Joe Burrow. He's got to get him to get that ball out faster, because that big weakness for Cincinnati can eventually cost them the game. So if head coach Zach Taylor continues to see their big weakness continuing to get weaker against the Rams pass rush, he needs Joe Burrow to get that ball out faster. And to do that, Zach Taylor's got to call out some quick play action or try to get Joe Burrow out of the pocket to do some bootleg mid-range passes just to get him away from Aaron Donald and Von Miller. And last but not least for the Bengals, the defense has to lock down. They have to go man-to-man, toe-to-toe with Cooper Kupp and Odell Beckham Jr. I know It's a simple yet complicated key to victory for the Bengals secondary, especially for Eli Apple. He's going to have a tough time either way, shadowing either one of them. So he's going to need some help from that rotation that contains the corners of Mike Hilton or Vernon Hargraves, Trey Waynes. Either way, they have to contain the explosiveness of Stafford's top weapons. So both of these teams, they've had opposing journeys to get back to the Super Bowl. Like I said, for Los Angeles, they pushed all their chips, yet mortgaged their future. They don't have a first round pick till I think 2024, 2025, and they're going to eventually be in cap hell by some point. But still, they're pushing all their chips. They're pushing all the donuts to finally win a title in Los Angeles, just like the Lakers did with LeBron James, or like the Dodgers did with all these pieces that included Clayton Kershaw. But for the Lakers and the Dodgers, Mickey Mouse title in a pandemic. But for the Rams, the fans are back in the stands. It's going to be a full house at SoFi in your home stadium. It's going to be important for them to actually try to pull this off, see if they can pay off this win. For Cincinnati, it's taken them very long, over 3 decades, to get back to the stage, and countless Marvin Lewis playoff failures and a long rebuild that has culminated into this. It's culminated in Joe Burrow carrying you, as well as that clutch defensive performance in recent weeks to get back to the big stage. So, who knows? Perhaps Cincinnati's biggest weakness in the offensive line will be their downfall against a talented group in Los Angeles. But then again, they've proven time and time again that in spite of their glaring weakness with the offensive line, Joe Burrow and the heroics of that offense, especially in the second half, have gotten them to victory. The defense has actually done better in the second half. The overall team in the Cincinnati Bengals are a second half team, and their second half heroics, their second half adjustments have gotten them to victory in the playoffs. So yes, you have a talented team that is the Rams, that has Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Odell Beckham Jr., Aaron Donald, Von Miller, and Jalen Ramsey. The Bengals, they have a talented team in themselves with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Trey Henderson, and T. Higgins. So it's kind of like an even talented matchup. So, but in all honesty, if the Bengals make the right adjustments, if they get Joe Burrow the ball out faster, they may just complete a fast and big turnaround in their franchise to get their first ever Super Bowl title. Yes, 3rd times could be the charm. And that's why I'm picking the Cincinnati Bengals to upset the LA Rams, despite their big glaring weakness. And this is not me just saying, oh, I want the Rams to lose because the 49ers lost the NFC Championship game. No. I mean, my heart does think that the Rams could win this easily, but I do think Cincinnati has what it needs to push the grid, defy all the odds to win the Super Bowl, bring its first title to Ohio, to Cincinnati, Ohio. They can do this. They can actually do this. If they believe, if they make the right adjustments, if they know how to limit that offense with Stafford, if the offensive line can protect Joe Burrow, the Cincinnati Bengals could possibly pull this off. But that's just my casual take on it. That's just my casual opinion on it. What we'll see on Super Bowl Sunday in Los Angeles on February 13th, 2022, who is going to come out on top as the Super Bowl champion of the 2021 NFL season. So what do you guys think? Who's going to win this Super Bowl? One final game of this crazy and yet good, really good NFL season. Let me know who you think is going to walk away the Super Bowl champion. But that is it for this episode of Very Cold Lasagna. I am your host, DylanLasagna. Thank you for tuning in into this fine episode 91, previewing Super Bowl 56 between the Los Angeles Rams and the Cincinnati Bengals. Make sure you tune into the podcast wherever you can and however you listen to your podcast, be it YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor FM, and Google Podcasts. Follow the show on social media, on Twitter and Instagram at Very Cold Lasagna, and keep that lasagna very cold in the fridge. Your takes on the world of pro wrestling and sports, very cold in the fridge, icy and spicy, like that very cold lasagna. And until next time, peace out.